This is Spamton. I'm not crazy. This is an Erhu, a two-string fiddle nearly 1,000 years older than the violin, and I want to use this to play Big Shot from Deltarune. So logically, I'll just take the Spamton theme, turn it into numbers so I can play it on the Erhu, make some digital accompaniment, and done. As easy as grabbing a piece of chalk from a supply closet. Yeah, no, Big Shot isn't like other music tracks. Big Shot threw a lot of big questions at me as a musician, not to mention the voice lines. But that's Future Mu's problem. For now, I just gotta ask, what's the story? Before I could properly play Big Shot, I had to first understand the story that Big Shot was trying to tell. And in order to do that, I had to learn more about Spamton and his story. So after absolutely binging some Deltarune gameplay and lore videos, I think I finally get now why Spamton as a character is so popular. Of course, if you're watching this video, you probably already know all about Spamton. So rather than just regurgitate everything that I just watched, let me provide a bit of a unique Erhu lens to this. Simply put, I think Spamton's story is two words. 吃苦. Okay, I know I'm kind of cheating by switching up the languages, so let me explain what I mean. Simply put, to eat bitterness refers to when you make sacrifices in order to achieve a certain goal. This isn't just the daily wear and tear of a typical job. Rather, to truly eat bitterness means to give up the daily pleasures of life. A healthy, balanced lifestyle, regular sleep, get-togethers with friends, entertainment, just to get one agonizing step closer to that dream stuck deep in your heart, that one thing you hold precious above all else, that... Hyperlink blocked. From what I've learned over the past few weeks, I think Spamton is as popular as he is because he embodies the concept of 吃苦 so well. Too well, even. After all, his downfall is also because of the all-consuming singular focus that 吃苦 entails, and his madness even trying to take the heart-shaped object of the only person who he could call a friend. And in that all-consuming nearsighted perseverance, Spamton fails, just like every other time, concluding the story of shattered dreams and societal neglect that is Spamton. The earliest mention of the phrase 吃苦 that I could find after some brief Googling was in the Chinese text 五子诗变文 from around the Tang Dynasty. But even without knowing the term itself, I think that the concept of 吃苦 has been around for so long that it doesn't take much to say that it is a universal human experience. It doesn't matter whether you're from 907 or 2021. That struggle for success, for meaning, for significance, at the risk of losing yourself, is ever present. So now, when I listen to Big Shot, I feel not just a fight theme, but an end-of-the-rope desperation to make every sacrifice worth it, to eat that one last bit of bitterness and become a true Big Shot. Musically, to get that desperation across, I think I'm actually going to start with the track that comes right before Big Shot, You Gone Wrong. Sure, You Gone Wrong is mostly just a slowed-down version of Big Shot, but that change in musical time will do a lot in order to get that feeling of last shot across. Of course, in order to do any of this, I'm going to have to play this on the Erhu, which brings us to the next question. How the heck am I going to play this on Erhu? So the baseline effort of playing something on the Erhu is pretty simple. First, I open a software that I can only understand a third of, then I spend a bit of time transcribing, then I practice for a bit, and by that I mean a month or two, and then I'm off to recording. But Big Shot, like a lot of tracks in Undertale and Deltarune, has leitmotifs. If you're familiar with Undertale or Deltarune's music, you've probably seen the oodles and boodles of videos talking about leitmotifs, but if not, leitmotifs are basically the mini themes that represent certain characters or places, like or you get the idea. This video by the paper person basically did all my work for me when it came to figuring out Big Shot's scale and leitmotifs, but now I had to figure out how to process these raw ingredients into something edible by Erhu standards. Some things like the scale that Big Shot uses looked unfamiliar to me at first, but then after tearing it up and switching up the pieces, it turned out to just be a scale from a piece I already knew. Other things like this build-up, I had to heavily alter while still trying to maintain that flavor. So rather than leave it granular like the original, I blended it up in my head as 4 intervals of slides, gave it some double chords to give it that gritty feeling, then filtered out the mixture until I got a smooth, silky set of trill slides. And other things needed just the right amount of viscosity, like this slide in the Freedom leitmotif. That do si do so la so fa mi do re. It's just ripe for Erhu slides, but you gotta be careful. It can't just be slides from the individual notes, otherwise it'd be too granular. You also can't make it a bunch of vague slides, that would be a bit too watery. Instead, you need to have a thick, almost sticky slide that takes its sweet time, like this rolling vibrato slide combo from the piece '撞别' or And Passion Farewell. As far as I know, we don't actually have a technical name for this sort of vibrato. There's really just so many types of vibrato when it comes to Erhu, but we can use this whenever we want to milk the sound of deep sobbing. Perfect for Spamton. Seriously though, vibrato is a hugely complex thing in Erhu music, and I'm just scratching the surface of it here. If you want to learn more about vibrato on Erhu, just go ahead and click the video up in the top right corner. Turns out Erhu vibrato is 5-dimensional if you look at it a certain way. Anyway, with all these ingredients properly processed, we have our smoothie, and it looks delicious. I guess that just about wraps it up.
Dang it. I forgot the last, most difficult thing.
So if you listen to Big Shot, one of the first things you notice are the chopped up voice lines meshed in with the music, most notably these.
Now it could be a big shot. Big shot.
Think it's coming from the inside of the ball. A hand played till you're all alone. It pulls straight in and make it ring until your heart turns red.
And if I'm playing Big Shot using an instrument from Tang Dynasty China, it stands to reason that I have to find a Tang Dynasty equivalent for these lore-heavy voice lines. But where am I gonna find an ancient Chinese description of Spamton lore? This is where that first step came in handy, because while there's no ancient Tang Dynasty poem about a crazy little guy with stark white skin and yellow and pink glasses, I can say with the glee of an Addison making it big, this is Spamton. I'm not crazy, because this is a Tang Dynasty poem that expresses someone who very nearly reached all of their dreams, only to find themselves free-falling at the last possible moment. Someone who very nearly got to work for the emperor himself, only to get rejected at the last possible moment for things outside of their control. Someone who wants to keep climbing, to keep going, but finds every river filled with ice and every mountain covered in snow. Someone who sees that the road is hard. So, I got the poem. But now, how do I turn the poem into voice lines?
直挂云帆济沧海，
直挂云帆去沧海。
Yeah, on that this will technically be the first piece where I sing in it, for lack of a better term. But thankfully, I will be applying a whole bunch of distortion and bit crushing on it, so the horror that is my untrained vocal performance will remain buried forever. No. Get. I'll save the full translation of the poem for the final reveal, but suffice to say that reading this poem really made me feel just how universal of a story Spamton's is. It doesn't matter what era you're in. There will always be struggle, and there will always be failure. And in that cesspool of desperation for just one more shot, You see the reflections of all failures past, some who finally made it through perseverance and luck, and others who, despite giving it their all, ended up sinking to the depths. And it makes you wonder, which one will you become? So, what do you think? Enough big? Enough shot? It's always a challenge tackling these sorts of high-paced electronic or digital music tracks while only using instruments like the Erhu. I feel like there's a special intensity that you get when you listen to stuff from digital or electronic genres. So hopefully you still got that feeling of needing to be a big shot just now, even with just traditional instruments. For now, if you like what you've heard so far and want to keep the Erhu goodness going, here's a past project of mine where I played the Nyan Cat theme. A short project, but a fun one. Until then, I hope to see you in another video. And as always, I hope you're well, wherever you are.